It happened again. You were nodding along, maintaining perfectly reasonable eye contact, maybe even throwing in the occasional "totally" or "yeah, absolutely." And then somewhere between their second sentence and their fifth, you just left. Not physically, you're still standing there, but mentally, you're somewhere entirely else, replaying a conversation from 3 days ago, or mentally reorganizing your kitchen cabinets, or doing absolutely nothing at all. And then they pause. They're clearly waiting for a response, and you have roughly 8 seconds to reconstruct what they just said from whatever thin fragments are still floating around in your head. We've all done this, but the people who do it constantly, who drift out of conversations chronically and consistently, are not bored, not dismissive, and they are almost certainly not as rude as they've been quietly made to feel. There's something very specific happening in their brains, and once you understand it, you'll never feel quit. So, let's start with what your brain is actually doing during a conversation. It isn't passively receiving information the way a microphone records sound. It is actively constructing meaning in real time, connecting what someone is saying now to what they said before, predicting where the sentence is going, deciding how you feel about it, preparing a response, monitoring your own facial expressions so you don't look confused or alarmed. Your prefrontal cortex is running multiple parallel processes simultaneously. And into that already crowded system, someone starts telling you a moderately long story about something that happened to their colleague. The brain does a quick cost-benefit analysis without asking you. And sometimes it quietly checks out. Not because you're broken. Psychologists have actually studied this with surprising precision. In 2010, researchers Killingsworth and Gilbert published a landmark study using real-time data from thousands of participants, and found that people spend nearly 47% of their waking hours thinking about something other than what they're actually doing. Nearly half. And crucially, this mind-wandering happened across virtually every activity they measured, including conversation. The default mode network, a set of brain regions that activates specifically when we're not focused on external tasks, doesn't politely wait for you to finish talking to someone. It runs in the background constantly, and sometimes it wins. Think about the last time you were genuinely gripped by what someone was telling you. You probably remember the exact shift in their expression, the specific detail that surprised you, a sentence that landed somewhere uncomfortable in your chest. You do not remember the parts where they were giving you logistical background information or explaining the timeline of events in chronological order. Because your brain made a judgment call without your input about what was worth registering. It was looking for meaning, emotion, and surprise. And when the conversation stopped delivering those things, even briefly, your mind went looking for them elsewhere. Attention isn't a tap you can leave running. It's more like a spotlight that keeps moving whether you want it to or not. Now, here's where it gets more personal than most people are comfortable admitting. A significant number of chronic zone-outers are not mentally absent because they're uninterested. They're absent because their internal world is extraordinarily loud. While someone else is speaking, these people are simultaneously processing what's being said, evaluating it, forming responses, second-guessing those responses, monitoring how they're coming across, and managing whatever background emotional static they carried into the room with them. This is documented. Research on high rumination individuals consistently shows that internally focused thought competes directly with external attention. The more active your inner monologue, the harder it becomes to stay fully present with someone else's words. You're not ignoring them. You're drowning them out by accident. If that's you, here's the distinction that matters. You don't have an attention problem. You have a bandwidth problem. There's also something worth acknowledging for the people on the receiving end of this, because the feeling of being zoned out on is real, and it would be unfair to wave it away. When someone's eyes glaze over while you're mid-sentence, the message your nervous system receives is not a neurological explanation. It's something much simpler and more painful. What you're saying doesn't matter enough. That's the signal. Even when it's completely inaccurate. Even when the person zoning out was actually more engaged with you emotionally than most people ever manage. The person who drifted probably did feel something during the conversation. They registered your frustration. They noticed the story behind the story. They were just temporarily pulled underwater by their own cognition at the exact wrong moment. And this points to something most people fundamentally misunderstand about attention. It is not a measure of interest or respect. Your brain does not allocate focus based on how much you care about someone. It allocates focus based on novelty, emotional intensity, and cognitive load. High novelty, attention snaps back. Emotional intensity, attention locks in. Cognitive overload, attention fractures.
This is why you can be utterly absorbed in a mediocre film you've never seen before and completely glaze over during a conversation with someone you genuinely love.
The brain is not making a moral judgment, it's managing resources. People who zone out frequently often share something else. They tend to be deeply internal processors. They don't just listen to what's being said. They're simultaneously contextualizing it, questioning it, connecting it to something they read once, feeling the emotional subtext underneath the words. Ask them what the person was actually talking about, and they might struggle. Ask them what was really going on underneath that conversation, and they tell you something remarkably perceptive. Because their brain was doing something else entirely, while it appeared to be simply listening. This doesn't mean you can't improve. Grounding techniques, making brief notes mentally, asking a question the moment your attention starts to slip. These things work because you're doing deliberately what your brain refuses to do automatically, redirecting the spotlight before it wanders too far. We're essentially building a small anchor point in the conversation, something concrete enough to hold your focus in place a little longer. But the guilt, the low-grade persistent belief that zoning out makes you a bad friend, a careless colleague, someone who doesn't truly value the people in their life, that part needs examining, because it was never really true, and yet a lot of people carry it for years without once questioning where it came from or whether it actually holds up. You are not indifferent. You are someone whose mind moves fast, processes deeply, and sometimes races ahead of the moment it's supposed to be standing still in. That's not a character flaw. The conversation was never lost. It went somewhere else for a moment. And most of the time, the most important parts made it through anyway. If you're interested in exploring some of these ideas further, I've put together a collection of books that go deeper into psychology, attention, and human behavior. You can find the full list on my bookshop page through the link in the description and pinned comment. And if you enjoy content like this, consider subscribing and turning on the notification bell so you don't miss future uploads.